Welcome to the NPC Energy. Today we're setting off on a bit of a simulated journey.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it's based on some anonymous sources that you listeners shared. And our mission basically is to explore this pretty wild possibility of multiple matrix resets.
Resets, like in the movie.
Exactly. And what that might mean for, our own sense of reality. These sources you sent over, they really dive headfirst into this whole idea. And one of the main questions they ask is pretty fundamental, really. It's like, in a world that might have been rebooted, who knows, countless times,
Yeah.
are there any real players actually left? Or have we all sort of unknowingly become part of the background call? Just, NPCs.
Wow. Okay, so jumping right into the deep end there. What's fascinating, though, right off the bat, is the almost playful way your sources approach this.
Totally.
There's a definite tongue-in-cheek vibe, isn't there? I mean, they even mention a red pill sommelier, which kind of signals we're not meant to take it all deadly seriously.
Exactly. It's like your sources took these genuinely interesting theories, these observations about everyday life, those moments where things just feel a little bit off.
Yeah, those glitches.
Right, glitches. And they layered in this humor, this idea that maybe we're just like spotting bugs in the system.
So we should probably unpack some of the main arguments here, the ones presented in the material. Maybe start with the in-universe resets, the stuff from the Matrix movies themselves.
Good idea.
And then we can maybe broaden out a bit, look at real-world simulation theory. You know, the kind of thing thinkers like Nick Bostrom or even Elon Musk have talked about.
Yeah, let's do that. So the in-universe stuff first.
Yeah.
The material you sent over specifically flags that scene, with the architect in the Matrix Reloaded.
The guy in the white room.
That's the one. And he literally says there have been at least 6 previous versions of the Matrix. 6? That's a lot of resets just within the movie's own story.
It is, yeah. It's a pretty significant detail. And if we sort of connect that, like your sources suggest we should, to the bigger picture of simulation theory, well, the implications get even bigger, don't they?
How so?
Well, thinkers like Bostrom, for example, have argued that if our reality is a simulation, and that's a big if, obviously.
Sure, yeah.
Then the chances are it's probably been run many, many times, maybe countless times. And Elon Musk, too, he's talked publicly about how plausible he thinks it is that we're in a simulation. So it's not just like a totally fringe idea anymore.
Right, it's seeped into the mainstream a bit. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Your anonymous sources bring up the Mandela Effect.
Yes, the Mandela Effect.
As something that, some people interpret as possible evidence for these resets. We're talking about those weird shared false memories people seem to have.
Like what specifically?
Well, the classic one is the Berenstain-Bears spelling, right? Was it Stain or Stein?
Right, I remember that one causing arguments.
Or people vividly remembering a Sinbad genie movie from the 90s called Shazam.
Which apparently never existed.
Exactly. Or even like slightly misremembering famous movie lines. Little things like that.
The Mandela Effect is definitely a very curious phenomenon. And what's fascinating here is how some people within this whole simulation framework view those memories.
How they see it.
They suggest these could be like residual echoes, leftovers from previous versions of the simulation, like a glitch in our collective memory banks.
Wow.
It certainly makes you question how reliable your own memories are, doesn't it? And maybe our shared history, too.
It really does. So, either we're all just really prone to misremembering things together, which, psychology probably has explanations for.
Sure, that's the conventional view.
Or, as your sources kind of joke, maybe the simulation devs keep loading the wrong save file.
Yeah.
I have to admit, thinking about it that way is definitely, well, it's more fun anyway.
It definitely sparks the imagination, yeah. Encourages you to think differently about these shared oddities. Now, should we dig a bit deeper into what these resets might actually, involve?
Please.
Because your sources have this really creative and sometimes funny take on it. They call it patch notes.
Oh, I loved this section. This idea of simulated patch notes 10,000 3.01 Tide Pod protocol. It's darkly funny, right?
It is, yeah.
But it also makes you think about how weird some real-world trends actually are. The material suggests resets could involve, actively removing certain types of players.
Disruptive elements, maybe?
Yeah, people messing with the system too much. Or reintroducing basic economic models when things get too crazy. The sudden arrival of new tech, even, like you said, fashion trends coming back around again. Low-rise jeans, apparently.
The low-rise jeans always come back. This whole patch notes analogy, though, is pretty good at illustrating how these resets might not always be, huge world-ending catastrophes.
Right, not necessarily wiping the slate clean every time.
Exactly. More like software updates.
Yeah.
Making tweaks, some subtle, maybe some not so subtle, to the underlying code of reality.
And the sources also mention real-world events that some people have theorized could be reset points,
They
right?
do. Things like the whole 2012 Mayan calendar thing. Remember all the fuss about that?
Oh, yeah. The end of the world that wasn't.
Right. Or the activation of the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. That got some people speculating. And, of course, more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, the pandemic, the material you sent framed that as a potential sort of global pause button, a huge event where, sadly, millions of people could be seen as having effectively dropped out of the simulation one way or another. It definitely makes you look at these massive historical shifts differently.
It does, and it leads naturally to, a very relevant question for anyone listening, especially given the themes in your sources.
Which is?
How do you know that you haven't at some point been maybe replaced? Or become a background character during one of these hypothetical resets?
Whoa. Yeah, that's a bit of a mind bender.
It is.
And the anonymous sources you shared, they actually list some potential signs, don't they? Things we might see around us that could hint at this.
They do. What sort of things?
Well, they mention a perceived mass personality flattening, things feeling a bit more generic, the rise of deepfake technology making it harder to tell what's real, the constant recycling of slang and culture, and yeah, those dreaded low-rise genes again. It's like sometimes things just feel inauthentic, like a repeat.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can maybe relate to that feeling, that sense of unease, like something in the culture just feels a bit off, or like ideas are just being rehashed almost artificially.
Mm-hmm.
And if you connect that back to this whole idea of simulation theory and potential resets, well, it does make you wonder about how genuine our current reality actually is.
And then the material dives into theories about what might actually happen to the real players, assuming these resets are a thing.
What happens to the original users, so to speak?
Yeah. So there's ascension theory, the idea that maybe the more enlightened people just log out, they leave the simulation.
Okay, peace out.
Kinda. Then there's loop fatigue, where players just get bored, tired of the same old reality loop maybe, and they consciously or unconsciously just leave.
Like quitting a game you've played too much.
Exactly. And then the more sci-fi one is a complete upload of consciousness, like moving your mind to a higher level server or something.
That upload idea is really interesting, especially with, all the talk about AI and consciousness these days. Could consciousness even exist outside of biology? Big questions there.
Huge. But here's a concept from your sources that I found really thought-provoking. It's called the NPC conversion hypothesis.
NPC conversion, what's that?
The idea is, what if active players don't necessarily leave the simulation entirely, but instead they sort of gradually become part of the background code? They turn into NPCs.
Whoa. So you could, lose your player status. That's kind of unsettling.
It really is. The sources even bring up cognitive scientist Dr. Donald Hoffman.
Ah, yeah, I know his work. Perception as a user interface.
Exactly. His idea that what we perceive isn't objective reality, but more like, the icons on your computer desktop. It's a simplified interface.
Right. It helps us function, but it's not the underlying truth.
So if you connect that idea to NPC conversion, it suggests that the more passively we just accept the reality presented to us without questioning it, the more our player code maybe gets overwritten. We lose that agency. We become part of the script.
Wow. Just gradually blending into the background simulation. That's a pretty heavy thought. Makes you wonder how you'd even, resist that.
Right. Which brings us to a really crucial point, and something your sources tackled directly. How can you personally figure out if you're still an active player in this whole hypothetical simulation?
Okay, how do you test yourself?
Well, the material includes this fun little pop quiz. It's designed to make you self-reflect on this exact question.
A pop quiz for reality. I like it. What's on it?
Okay, so it asks things like, do you still actively question the rules, the norms around you? Do you push back? Do you have memories that feel a bit off, like they don't quite match up with what everyone else remembers or the official story?
Mandela Effect again, maybe?
Sort of, yeah, but maybe more personal ones too. Also, do you notice odd details? Little inconsistencies that other people just seem to gloss over.
Interesting. Like spotting the glitches.
Exactly. Do you find yourself acting randomly sometimes, doing unexpected things just because?
Yeah.
Breaking your own patterns?
Okay. And anything else?
Yeah, one more. Have you ever experienced unexplained sensory stuff? Weird sounds, sights, feelings that just don't have a clear cause.
Hmm.
Apparently, according to these sources, answering yes to some of these might suggest you still have some player energy left. You're not fully scripted yet.
That's clever. These questions are really designed to make you pay more attention, aren't they? To be
Yeah.
more critically engaged with just everything around you.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is the underlying idea that these seemingly small personal quirks could actually mean something deeper. Like they could be signs you're still an active participant.
So, okay, if you think you might be losing player energy or you just want to maintain it, what can you actually do? Did the sources offer any, tips?
They did, yeah. And some of it is surprisingly practical, almost playful advice.
Like what?
Well, things like consciously randomizing your daily routines. Don't just do the same thing every single day on autopilot.
Okay, shake things up.
Right. Actively seek out and ask unusual questions. Don't just accept the standard answers. Track your déjà vu experiences. Pay attention to when that happens.
Why déjà vu specifically?
Well, in this context, it could be seen as maybe a hint of a previous loop or iteration repeating itself,
Okay.
a glitch showing through.
Gotcha.
Also, try to avoid predictable, scripted conversations. The ones where you know exactly what the other person's going to say and what you're expected to say back.
Small talk hell, basically.
Kind of, yeah. The overall idea seems to be about deliberately engaging with the world in ways that aren't expected. Actively look for patterns, but also question them. Don't just accept the mundane.
I really like the suggestion to watch the world like a tester.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Like actively look for the bugs, the inconsistencies, the things that just don't quite add up logically. It's a mindset, isn't it? A way to stay alert and not just take everything at face value.
Exactly. It's about maintaining that critical awareness. And if we tie this all the way back to where we started with the matrix resets and the nature of reality,
Yeah.
maybe that very act of questioning, of actively looking for those glitches, maybe that's the key difference. The thing that separates a player with agency from an NPC just running their code.
So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, navigated these pretty wild theories from the anonymous sources about frequent resets, players dropping out, maybe even turning into NPCs. What are the main takeaways people should chew on?
Well, I think first, remember the core concepts from your sources. There's the in-universe idea. From the matrix itself, at least 6 resets mentioned by the architect.
Oh, right.
But then there's the broader simulation theory angle, pushed by people like Bostrom and Musk, suggesting maybe reality gets rebooted constantly, maybe on a massive scale we can't even comprehend.
And the Mandela Effect got brought up as this weird phenomenon. Some people link to that, glitches or leftover data from previous versions, the Berenstain Bears, Shazam, all that.
Exactly. We also looked at what resets might actually involve using that patch notes idea from your sources. Not always world-ending, maybe just tweaks, removing players, changing economic rules, introducing tech, cycling trends.
Yeah, the patch notes for reality. And we considered how some real-world events, 2012, CERN, the pandemic, get interpreted by some through this reset lens.
And that central question kept coming up. Are there any real players left?
Yeah.
Your sources pointed to things like perceived personality flattening, deepfakes blurring reality, culture constantly recycling, even fashion trends coming back as potential signs of an NPC-dominated world.
Right. And the theories about where the players go, ascension, loop fatigue, uploading.
Yeah, various potential escape routes or dropout reasons. But that NPC conversion hypothesis was particularly sticky, wasn't it?
Definitely. The idea that you don't leave, you just fade into the background code, become part of the script, tied into Hoffman's idea of perception being a user interface, not objective reality.
And then there was the pop quiz section, those questions designed to make you reflect. Do you still question things, have weird memories, notice glitches, act randomly, experience odd sensations, all framed as possible signs of lingering player energy?
Yeah, checking your own pulse, metaphorically speaking.
Pretty much. And finally, those suggestions for maintaining player status. Randomize your life, ask weird questions, track déjà vu, avoid scripted interactions, watch the world like a bug tester.
All playful, maybe, but with an underlying point about staying engaged and aware, right? Whatever reality actually is.
Exactly. Because ultimately, whether we're on reset number 6 or reset number 10 million, the real question your sources seem to pose is, how do we keep a sense of agency? How do we stay aware in a world that can sometimes feel, well, strangely prescripted?
And maybe the answer is just in the asking. in the looking.
Perhaps the very act of questioning, of searching for those glitches in the matrix, is exactly what keeps our own player energy switched on. So thinking about all this, what subtle details, what little inconsistencies will you start to notice differently now?